I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. And I don't have to read the policy, so I need to just take that off. John, are you doing roll call today? Or Susie? Do you want to introduce Susie really quick before we start?
It would be my pleasure. This is our Climate Action Committee, or some of the members of it. This is our new planning technician, Susie. I'm going to mispronounce your last name. I'm going to let you do it.
Susie Mahungu.
Thank you. And so she's going to be with us for your meetings, running the Zoom part of it, and helping assist. And so, yeah, we will see how she does at pronouncing your names.
Okay. Emmett Hopkins.
I'm here.
Alex Goodman.
He's present on Zoom.
I'm here.
Okay.
I'll be there in about 10 minutes or less.
Okay. Dana Allen.
She let us know she's not going to be here today.
Okay. Joshua Somim.
He is off in the mountains.
Kenna Lee.
I'm here.
Lisa Lett Pierce.
Here.
Deborah Burns.
She is not going to be here today.
Sonali Shanti.
Here.
Zeno Switjink.
Yeah.
That's me.
Ambrosia Thompson.
She is on vacation.
Evert Fernandez.
And he is not going to be here today.
Diana Rich.
Vice Mayor Rich let us know she's not going to be here today.
And Sandra Maurer.
I'm here.
Excellent. Thank you. And I will calculate. Do we have any action items? I can calculate the quorum.
I think we'll have a quorum when Alex gets here.
Okay. I'll confirm that.
But we will see if any of these turn into action items. I believe the action items would be the Vision Zero proposal and the EV charging proposal, as far as I know. But yeah.
And also possibly approval of the electrification survey to, so.
The survey has a number of action items.
Yes.
Wonderful. And unfortunately, I had an inspiration and I both forgot it and forgot to bring it. So if anyone feels inspired today by our beautiful Sonoma County weather, while so much of the world is not having beautiful weather, feel free to share. But otherwise, we will move on to review of action items, which unfortunately I don't have. So we'll skip unless someone else knows of any action items from last time. I understand there weren't any.
I do have one item, which is the SB 252 letter of support, and that will be on next week's council agenda.
Great, thank you.
And thank you, Lisa, for your
I
assistance.
believe you helped with that. Thank you.
Sorry, I missed that. Can you repeat it? My hearing is really not.
Sure. So there was a proposal to ask council to support SB 252, which is requesting that CalPERS divest of fossil fuel companies. And so that went through the climate action for recommendation, was recommended to council, and Lisa and Woody helped with the letter for that, and that will be on city council's agenda next Tuesday for their consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right, so now we're at the part of the meeting where we take comments from the public regarding any items that are not on their agenda. And I see we have a great sampling of the public today, although maybe not gender balanced. So I don't want to assume anyone's gender. Does anyone from the public have something to speak to the committee about this not on our agenda today? It's shocking. Okay. Although we do have a lot on the agenda. Does anyone have a statement of conflict of interest regarding anything on today's agenda? All right. So we're ready for our planning department report. Who will be giving that today?
I will be giving that, and it's fairly brief. So again, obviously, we have a new planning technician. We're very happy about that. She started last Wednesday. The city council did also pass both the operating budget and the capital improvement budget at their June 28th meeting on time, the first time in a couple of years so yay. It was a tough year, as you all know. I don't think anything further with the climate action. I think we've updated in the past the items that were reduced by the budget subcommittee. The council did end up concurring with those. And so things like the zero waste, we did say that we would do that only if we got a grant. So the zero waste subcommittee would be looking at that. I think Zero Waste Sonoma does sometimes have grants. I know they did last year for like the compost purchasing and things like that. But I don't know if they will this year or not. If they do, we would be able to utilize that funding. But otherwise, we do still have support for like the active transportation plan, which is going to be happening this year or has already started. And so that is, that's part of the planning department's normal work plan that involves the CAC. Otherwise, we're good to go with the committee continuing in this format. And I think the other items, and I'll ask John to chip in too, he might know some items, but we do Woodmark, the 84-unit affordable housing on Bodega. They have started in earnest their first phase, which is 48 units. And that they're doing grading right now, which is always the messy part. And they have quite a bit of grading. So that is ongoing right now. We also have the Habitat for Humanity 4-unit townhomes that was approved last year have submitted for their building permit. So looking at that project probably going forward this year, which is great. Those 4 townhomes are across from Safeway on the vacant lot there. The Hotel Sebastopol is continuing to work on their background stuff until they get the archaeology approval so that they can start construction. And what else is going on? It's a busy summer, I know.
We've filed the notice of preparation for the Canopy project, which is 80 units of housing behind the O'Reilly Media Center on the north end of town. That has a scoping meeting set up on July 18th at 3 p.m. So if anybody's interested in that, it'll start the kind of kickoff meeting for the environmental impact report that needs to be done for that project. And I think the other thing is last month, I sat on the SCTA's active transportation countywide plan that's going to be starting off here pretty soon. And they are going to be doing public involvement engagement throughout that whole process. So it's going to be a couple-year project with I think the proposed adoption for the jurisdictions in the county is going to be the end of February 25 or 24. I can't remember the exact dates, but I have, if anybody's interested in it, I can share the slides from that kickoff meeting for that.
Thank you. Zeno. Oh, sorry. I'll let the chair.
Yeah, I think we talked about this before. There is a citizen representative seat on that committee that mostly consists of staff, but each city can also appoint a citizen, and we brought it up here. So I wonder where that's at to get the city council appoint somebody.
Yes, so that is a member that does need to be appointed by city council. So we'd have to bring that to city council because they are an active voting member of that committee. So that would
Just to clarify, you guys are talking about SCTA, correct? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so we would have to bring that to our city council to appoint a member. We'd have to have an open application process for that.
So what's the timeline on that?
So Jen and I have not scheduled that yet. We do need to write a staff report for it. And so the earliest it would go to council would be August 1st, I think they have a meeting. It's a consent item usually unless they want to discuss it. And Councilmember Maurer, I don't know if you have any input or thoughts on that for council.
I thought we already had one for the SCTA.
So we have, John is our official voting representative,
Okay.
which is the staff member, but you, and John, maybe you can explain it because you talked with them about whether or not we could have both that and a citizen.
Yeah, so the citizen is an active voting member on the board, so it wouldn't, if I was unable to attend the meeting, they could still vote for that, whatever action item is on there. So it would need to be a member that is approved by city council to be in that position. So it's not just an advisory, or if, I'm unable to make it, it is an actual voting member of that board.
So we can look forward to, should it first go to the city council and then we have a
Yeah, so you,
request to apply?
right, usually there's an application period.
And what is your sense? How fast can this go? Because
I think those are usually 4 weeks. I know we have at least 2 people interested though, so we might be able to shorten that. And we can, I think council generally wants enough time that people of interest can apply to it. But we maybe, I would say maybe 3 weeks is probably good. And then those, whatever applications we get need to be scheduled with council to
Right,
review.
right.
And that's something we need to work with the city clerk with.
okay, well, I'm happy this is moving forward. It's a very complicated matter, and I think the citizen who wants to step up and do this needs sufficient time to digest all the material, right?
Yeah. And
I also had a question about these building projects. Is there like EV charging in these building projects and bicycle parking?
Yeah, for the City Ventures project, yes, there is both. There is a requirement to provide a percentage of the parking to be EV charging, and then also within our code, depending on the type of use, there's a requirement for bicycle parking. I know for sure that the City Ventures project, the Canopy, is providing some bike repair stations, or at least one bike repair station on the north end that connects the West County Trail along kind of Mill Station Road up there. And then it'll also have some paths going through the project to connect over to Hurlbut, which is within the county's jurisdiction.
Yeah, so is this aspect of the proposal of these developers reviewed by the planning department or the, I'm a bit concerned that this is all new technology, new infrastructure, new ideas, that the city not yet has the level of expertise to see whether this is really a good location for bicycle parking or EV charging.
Zeno, these
So
are approved projects.
I'm encouraging the city staff to reach out to people in the community who work on these issues.
Yeah, thank you, Zeno. So we did update our code in 2018. It went into effect January 2019 to require the EV parking. And we have a certain percentage that is required if it's regular charging. And then if you do the fast charge, I think there's a slightly different percentage. And then we do require bicycle parking for any development as a percentage of the vehicle spaces. And for bicycle parking, I think I'm probably qualified, as I didn't own a car till I was 25. I've had a bicycle and then a motorcycle to understand kind of where, having lived in cities and whatnot, to figure out where the best bicycle parking is. So we do definitely review that as staff with that eye of making sure it's accessible as well as safe for the bicycle part of it. And then for the EV side of it, our building department is reviews, California Building Code requires, and I'm elected Jerry, but it requires that you have it every garage space EV ready anyway, which is what they will be doing with City Ventures because they do have garages. And then they will also have a certain percentage of EV chargers required as part of that development for the guest parking. So they will have that throughout. And the City Ventures project is actually also a electric only development. There's no gas. So, and that's part of one of the things they do for the, go ahead.
I was just going to mention, when we adopted Tier 1 for Title 24, part of that covers EV parking as well. In fact, one of the things we had in our recommendation at the time was we should re-examine our code and find out if we've either been redundant or we have items in there that the state wouldn't allow. This involved in 2018, as you know.
Right. Thank you. And I'm just going to repeat that since this is being aired, that the city did adopt Tier 1 of the California Green Building Code, which does have the same kind of requirements for EV. We will keep them in our code because it also applies to major renovations where you might not necessarily get it. Like when the Starbucks took over Burger King, we actually made it part of their use permit to install EV, even though the building code would not have required that at all. So we are definitely looking at that as, you know, use permits and things like that come. And we also required more bicycle parking spaces than our code required, just because of it's right by the trail and everything. So yeah, so we are looking at that. And as we do development review, that is one of our hats and jobs as the planners.
Well, since we're talking about this, there is something that I've just been wondering about, and I'm assuming it's already been handled, but last time I saw the Woodmark stuff, it only called for the infrastructure and the wiring going to chargers, but not the chargers themselves that the developer would be required to install. So I'm just wondering if you happen to know if that got changed out.
They
It
are
probably
required
did.
to install a certain so what our code, I don't have it memorized, but they are required to install a certain amount of chargers for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because obviously if it's a rental development and it's affordable housing at low income, people aren't going to have the ability to install the charging themselves.
All right. Are we ready
got
to move
one more,
on
I
with our
think.
agenda? Okay.
It's a quick question. Can you clarify, is there no council member who is on the SCTA board?
I believe Mayor Hinton is the city's representative to the SCTA board.
Oh, okay.
What we're talking about here is the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the countywide
Okay.
bicycle and pedestrian.
Okay,
It's
thank
one of their committees.
Yeah, thanks.
Phew. Okay. Sandy, do you have anything further to report from City Council?
Just, I have a couple of things. I also wanted to mention that the council finalized the budget and that it is a $2 million deficit budget this year and certainly not sustainable. Very concerning, actually. But we gained a new fire engineer and a new police chief sergeant, and we lost the non-toxics newsletter, the STEP newsletter. So that won't be published. There's going to be one last newsletter, and then that will end, unfortunately. And the council is starting the process of hiring a new city manager. So this process can take, months, but we've started that process. So I want this group to know. And the other thing is that last night I attended the SDA, that's the Sebastopol Downtown Business Association, and the chamber. They had a joint meeting, and they're talking about merging. And I was listening, as I'm listening to the different people talking, thinking that possibly the Climate Action Committee might consider having a representative, or if you're interested in going to those meetings, because they are talking about community vitality and wellness, which I think is one of your items as well. So I just wanted to let you know that they're in the process of making possibly some really big changes for those groups. And they have a goal to vitalize the economy, vitalize the community. So I think that's a good goal. Thank you.
The city manager you're recruiting, did they also be the city attorney, or?
It will just be a city manager position. Yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you, Sandy, and thank you, Planning Department, for your report. We will move on to our regular agenda, which starts with Carrie again for the community impact assessments.
And I apologize, I do not have an update on this. I know that I said, and I don't know if there's much to report on it, but so it is in our general plan to consider using those.
Can you just do a tiny background summary?
Sure. So when you're doing development review, there are certain things that we are required to review either by state law or by our own code. So like the California Environmental Quality Act. So environmental impacts, often you hear about that. It's either exempt or you'll like the Canopy 80 unit development project is actually doing a scoping meeting for an environmental impact report to look at all the potential impacts. One of the things that does not get evaluated by CEQA is the sort of the more esoteric, for lack of a better word, impacts on a community. So how would it change your community? CEQA does have greenhouse gas emissions and other air quality and those types of things as part of its impact report. But it doesn't have sort of the community character and the sort of the equity matrix that this group has developed is kind of lacking in that more nuanced way. And so the city of Sebastopol, when we did our general plan in 2016, recommended considering using those for larger projects as well. And so there was a group or a subcommittee that developed a draft community impact report kind of format. And so I will share that with the committee so that you can potentially think about is that something you could use or does, for evaluating your own projects, or are there items that, if we do start to use that, the Climate Action Committee would want to also be included in that. Now, I will say that was, and this was a little bit before my time, they decided not to adopt that. So I'm not quite sure of the history on why they decided not to do that. I think it was just, well, I'm not going to say because I don't know. So I'm not going to, I'm not sure why. I'll try to find a little background on that. But there was a draft that was done that was still considered relevant. So I'll share that.
Great, thank you. So we'll move to the Vision Zero proposal. I believe that's Emmett.
Yeah, thanks. Whoops. Okay, so the purpose of having this on the agenda today is just to give a little update on the concept and where we are, and get some preliminary feedback from the committee, so that we can come back in probably late summer or fall with something that we could vote on. So I'm thinking that maybe I'll give a quick overview reminder of what the heck Vision Zero is and how it relates to climate action, and then we can jump into the draft proposed resolution. And other transportation working group folks, feel free to jump in if you want to add something while I'm talking. Okay, so what's Vision Zero? So real quick, off of the Vision Zero Network website, we have this summary. Vision Zero is a strategy to eliminate all traffic fatalities and severe injuries while increasing safe, healthy, equitable mobility for all. And this is a global framework that's was used a lot in Europe and has moved to a lot of American cities now. And Sonoma County has adopted a Vision Zero action plan countywide, and from that I can share just kind of these core principles of Vision Zero, so you have a sense of what how it's what the strategy is. So the core principles are: 1, saving lives, that human life and health should be the highest priority within all aspects of transportation systems. 2 is prevention, that traffic deaths and severe injuries are preventable. And 3 is safe streets, that human error is inevitable and transportation systems should be designed to anticipate error. So the consequence is not severe injury or death. And so they kind of contrast like the traditional approach to transportation planning with the Vision Zero approach. So traditional approach, traffic deaths are inevitable. Vision Zero says traffic deaths are preventable. Traditional says we assume perfect human behavior in our systems. Vision Zero says we integrate human error into our approach. Traditional approach says we prevent collisions. Vision Zero says we focus more on preventing the fatal and severe injury crashes as opposed to everything. And then traditional approach puts individual responsibility, like individuals are responsible for safety enforced through traffic stops. And Vision Zero says that we have collective responsibility based on safe systems approach. So that's kind of the general concept. And then how it relates to climate action is, of course, that we're trying to, like 60% of our emissions here in Sonoma County are from transportation sector. We're trying to mode shift people away from cars into other modes, whether it's buses, bicycles, or walking. And one of the highest obstacles for people to shift to walking or bicycling is just the fear of safety, of worrying about yourself or your family getting hurt while you're out on the street for obvious reasons. So that's kind of the background of why this is a topic that we're interested in. And then jumping to the specific idea of the resolution for the city council to pass within the draft, the framework for that this committee, I don't know, is it still in draft form? I'm not totally clear. Is the framework with the action steps? Okay, it's approved. Yeah, I just wanted to refer to it correctly. Within that, I'm getting an echo here. We have within. Does anybody know why that's happening? Okay, so I guess this is within the transportation section. We have category number 3, making biking, walking, and other active transportation options safer and easier by implementing a complete streets approach. And then within that, we have an action to review SCTA's Vision Zero report and adopt a Vision Zero resolution that identifies actions Sebastopol will implement to eliminate traffic fatalities. So it's right there in the list of actions. And so what we've done is, so the idea here is to come up with a resolution that we could agree within the committee to present to the city council and propose that they pass it. And so we've taken the sample resolution that is from the Sonoma County Vision Zero action plan that they have in their appendix, and we've modified it and plugged in City of Sebastopol everywhere it says your jurisdiction and things like that, of course, and made some other additions, and are still getting some feedback on it to do some final modifications. But we would like to A, take questions about it, B, any specific feedback about the draft that was shared with the agenda, and then we also have a couple specific questions that I can get to maybe after the general feedback.
So I have a draft here that was sent out. Is that what we're talking about right now?
Right.
Yeah, it's not finished.
Correct.
It's just still a draft. Do you have any of the statistics to put into some of these brackets?
We haven't dug up the Sebastopol specific statistics yet, just to put in there. There is a county, the county does have their Vision Zero dashboard that, so yeah, we'll need to get that. But we do have in there, we do have the specific, I'm trying to remember the exact terminology, but high injury intersections, I believe there's reference to those. There are a few in Sebastopol.
Anything further, Sandy? Okay. I have lots of questions, but I don't want to hog the floor.
Can
don't
I,
see
can I
anyone else.
just add
Yeah.
one thing as staff? So thank you, Emma. That was a wonderful presentation. I did also check with SCTA, my contact there, who's and the Vision Zero. It does not necessarily commit the city to anything that would be sort of burdensome in terms of budget, or now you have to do this or that. So I did check on that, and so I think as staff we feel comfortable with this moving forward.
Thank you so much. On the other hand, not committing to anything concrete risks being meaningless. So, yeah, so I had the same question as Sandy of like, do we have our local numbers? And the third whereas where we, it's not highlighted. So you have a lot of places that are highlighted to fill things in, but you give Sonoma County percentages, but it's hard to know whether those apply to Sebastopol in particular. So I would hope that you would at least try to find Sebastopol specific for that area, as well as the ones that you do have highlighted. I would love for there to be an actual listing or an appendix that says what the 4 high injury intersections are, like listing them, or some kind of map, or it's just something that shows a little bit more concrete where we're talking about impact here. And then I wondered about the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th whereas, which is racial profiling and income inequality are reflected in disparities in traffic enforcement. And while I know that that's true nationwide, I'm not sure if we have clarity on that in our city. And I have some concerns about bringing something like that forward at the city level without any data to back that up. So unless we cite where that's coming from, it feels like it could be criticizing a department that we don't know is guilty of that.
That we have confidence in. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had concerns about including that, although I think it's an important point in the larger scale. I'm not sure at city scale whether that's something we would want to include. I do feel like in this larger thing, there's so much here that you lose a little bit of the sense of like, here's the theory of change of like why Vision Zero would work. And I think this is a traffic safety plan with a climate co-benefit, and being a little bit more clear of here's the main thrust of this, and here's why it also benefits the climate, instead of mixing it all in together, because the logic gets a little out there of just trying to pull them all together. So just laying that theory of change out a little more straightforwardly. And I know you were building this off someone else's ideas and it's maybe it would be a lot of work to go back, but I do think that would make it more clear and potentially more compelling. So what were my other comments? Sorry, give you a minute. If you have any responses to anything that I'm saying, just butt in.
Following up on that one, we had talked about also like having a letter that would accompany it to the city council, or from the committee to the city council. I think that might be a one place where we could cover some of those kind of the more boiled down like theory of change and how it relates to climate change, or we could put that more clearly up front. But I do think, I guess to me, I wouldn't want to strip out a lot of the other relevant things that are more like transportation planning related, because if we're going to have the council pass a Vision Zero resolution, like it seems like it should be comprehensive and not just like the climate part of it, and then does that
well,
make
no, it's
sense
not that
to
it
you?
should be a separate resolution, just kind of clarifying like this is a traffic safety thing. It also provides a climate co-benefit,
Yeah.
instead of like this is a client. It just feels a little bit like let's throw in the kitchen sink here. It has health, has climate co-benefits, it has health co-benefits, it has, but like the main thrust is traffic safety and preventing deaths. And then, it's like any multi-pronged, anything that has a lot of co-benefits, you have to be clear, kind of like, here's where these different things are all coming together.
Right.
I mean, I'm for all of it. I did feel like as a reader, and I know I'm not a city council member, so I'm not one of the people who would be doing this, that maybe it's more clear if you're a little bit more involved with all the different levels. But it's confusing to me. What is the difference between a complete streets approach and a Vision Zero approach? Like how do those things complement each other? How do they work together? How are they different? Because complete streets, in my surface level understanding of it, is also a kind of systems level approach to traffic planning and all these things. So like, what does Vision Zero bring that complete streets doesn't already have? So just delineating that a little bit would help me as a reader understand why this is needed. Yeah, and as someone who's had not one, but two friends and colleagues mowed down in pedestrian intersections and needed complete knee replacements after that, I'm for it all. But I think we just try to do as good a job as we can. On the last page, where it's be it further resolved, add here examples of specific types of actions. To me, that's the core of it. And so the rest of it is just is set up. But that's where I'm like, oh, this is what I was waiting for. So I think that's really the heart of this whole proposal is what is it that we need? Yeah.
I think, not to have a pun here, but I think we kind of need to know where the rubber meets the road. Like,
Yeah.
What are we going to do for Vision Zero? Like, we can adopt it and that's all cool, but what are we going to do, or what are we asking the council to do?
Yeah, and yeah, I think we can add some things there, but I think we can't say, right, that, I mean, the council's not going to agree to say that we're going to put class 4 protected bike lanes like on all major streets next year or something, right? But so we can list like priority like street treatments that are like proven to be effective, I think. And I did try to, like, those last two, be it resolved, to me were important as well, that are basically like creating a way that the committee can have some agency to be a part of pushing for change in the future. And I'll state what they are for people who aren't looking at it. That the City of Sebastopol will collaborate with the Transportation Working Group of the Sebastopol Climate Action Committee to identify additional high priority roadways and intersections within the city, and then related note that the city would collaborate with the working group of the committee to identify, evaluate, and implement solutions in high priority roadways and intersections. And of course, it doesn't say how or how we would collaborate. And so if anyone has ideas or suggestions about how to make that stronger, to be open to that.
It almost seems like those two last items maybe could be combined, because they're almost saying the same thing, but that's just a thought.
I have a question and a comment. When didn't we just do the master plan for the city? Did we just finish that?
So we did the general plan
General
update in
plan.
2016,
Okay.
and that did identify, I mean, it is very focused on bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure.
Uh-huh.
There's been a lot of follow-on work with that. So so W-Trans, which is a traffic consultant, but they do a lot of consulting for the city. They have done pedestrian safety studies, and so we have been implementing.
Okay.
And obviously, since that 2016, the green bicycle lanes have our engineering departments worked with Caltrans to get those installed. A lot of the ADA crosswalk to improve ADA, and we are putting in additional crosswalk improvements, both with Caltrans, who are doing one at McKinley and 116, so right at the plaza crossing to where the hotel site is, We are doing some rapid flashing beacons on Bodega Avenue, and there's one other location which is approved by council. I don't know, Sandy, if you remember what it is, but there were two intersections that are being done with the Quick Strike grant. So the city's actually team is actually pretty focused on that. The other thing that we have done is we did do a local road safety plan recently, which has been adopted. So there are a lot of kind of pieces of it that are, and sort of roadmaps of what we should be doing, with that.
And just so I understand, for the general plan, how often do we look at, is that every 5 years that we review that? Is that what I understand?
It's probably about every 20 years.
But there's no meeting in between where you just review. I thought that was a 5-year refresh kind of thing.
So the housing element is required to be every 8 years.
Okay.
That's the only element that has a required update. However, the planning department does do an annual level of service report to council. And in that, we probably every couple of years, we do an update on, if you look at the general plan, the last chapter is implementation, and it's actually kind of a big chart, and it sort of organizes and prioritizes. There's immediate actions, which are category A, B, and C in terms of the more future kind of range stuff. And then there's some ongoing stuff in there. We do an update probably every couple of years to council, gathering all the information from all the different departments on where, because the general plan is a lot of it's planning, but some of it's like the engineering department and the fire department. There's a safety element, right, and
Right.
whatnot. So we do an update to council every couple of years on that.
So I guess my last question is, given all those different things, where do you see the best implementation of, we can adopt it, right? That's, we're all for it, but where does the actual, where can this group, or where can we support the city and the city staff in identifying ways that, opportunities or intersections or data, where can we be the most beneficial, I guess?
Sure.
Maybe filling out a little bit of that section, or just giving us some brainstorming part of that. What are the specific types of actions the city can take to reduce fatalities, and where can we help there?
Sure. So like I said, W-Trans does do kind of analysis of intersections based on the local road safety plan did actually identify a lot of the intersections of concern. So the local data and understanding, and can you make a note? We can send out a link to that local road safety plan so y'all can look at that, because that did look at we have had a couple of pedestrian fatalities in the past, and so we certainly have upgraded some of those. But we know where there were incidents, and so identifying those. For instance, I know Morris Street and Laguna Parkway, where people are going back and forth and kind of there's no crosswalk from Morris Street and Highway 12 anywhere north of there, but there's a lot of pedestrian crossing. And so that was identified. And then again, up here at the community center, as potential crosswalk kind of stuff. So I think for the transportation group, and I will say that should also include our planning commission kind of as one of those steps, because they do look at land use and our general plan, our capital improvement plan, in terms of when the city needs help prioritizing, which and kind of looking at, we have this local road safety plan. We know from our general plan the places that we're looking at, being involved in the types of community meetings that, with the larger projects we have going on with City Ventures. There is a traffic study being done. The general plan does note the 3 locations in town that may need additional signals or roundabouts. They're all in 116. One is for Crust. It's probably furthest down the road. Healdsburg and Murphy. So 116 and Murphy. And we do have a new potential 22 units going in there. They have not submitted their application yet, but is that going to trigger that or not from a vehicle level? And there's already a crosswalk there. And then Covert Lane, which is, that to me, that's kind of the potential for a roundabout compared to the other 2, which really don't have a lot of right of way. Like Healdsburg and Murphy, you're never getting a roundabout there. That's going to be a signal in my mind. But the Covert Lane, that And so that's actually one where the planning department, so involvement in the various work products that the city is doing to help bring those to light and advise us on that is actually where we could use a lot of help. A couple things going on. The city did apply for a sustainable transportation grant to Caltrans. We're supposed to hear sometime in summer. I have no idea what that means from Caltrans on that, and that would that'd be led by the engineering department and W-Trans, but that would be looking at potentially like, making sure that the downtown area is walkable and things like that. Yes, potentially looking at the two-way versus one-way street. And I know even folks on this committee have feelings about that or have made public comments about that, but that is also in our general plan to review. So that is kind of one of those components. The city venture project is a lot of development on the north side of town. So how is that going to impact Covert Lane? That's one of the things we will be looking at. And then additionally, the planning department just found out that we got a $250,000 grant to look at the 116 corridor in terms of the zoning for where we have commercial. Are there areas where it's appropriate to allow residential without having to go through a use permit process? What would that look like? And also what type of infrastructure would be needed as part of that? And so that it's all kind of, intertwined. And so involvement in those when we have community meetings or when we have draft materials. It's sort of like when we did the Calder Creek naturalization work in Ives Park. This group, and particularly Josh Oas, a landscape architect, attended some of those meetings, made public comments, reviewed the draft. And that was really helpful to have kind of a member of the Climate Action Committee, but also with that expertise reviewing those.
Jerry?
General plan because there was some zoning that didn't work out, and the land use specified in the general plan was inappropriate for where the city was going.
Correct. So you can, under state law, you can do up to 5 general plan amendments a year. So they do limit that because it's supposed to be a stable document and vision, long-term vision. So we will be working on one this year to incorporate our local hazard mitigation plan into our safety element. But yeah, there's definitely capacity to amend it. Right. And then also in our general plan, the pedestrian bicycle master plan from 2010, 2011 is adopted by reference in the general plan. And again, that we're right now going through, it's now called the active transportation plan, but as John reported, that the kickoff for that has just happened. And so being involved with that, because a lot of those are, related improvements.
Steve?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of give more specific as far as possible action. But as a pedestrian who uses a lot of these crosswalks that are nice lights, almost everything. Yeah, there are so many near misses that happen, even with the blinking lights. I think from in particular, there are too many signs that are blocking the blinking lights. Some obvious stuff is low hanging fruit that we could do to improve traffic safety. You get out there with a truck going, and the other pedestrians don't even see the blinking sign because the truck blocks it. So you're out there in the intersection, where a truck might be, if something stops, if you have some cue to those other drivers that are right next to them. It's when it's 2 lanes, there's a real issue of visibility. And I think there wasn't already, I'm not sure if it's fatality or not, at that intersection. Definitely injured pedestrians. And I've seen it multiple times, near this. And we think these are the most safe because they have a blinking light.
There's a red light on Highway 12, and the cars drive straight through.
Yes, all of us walkers, many of us are walkers, know of all the dangers out there. So thank you all. Thank you, Emmett, and I'll keep asking you a couple more questions and then I'll stop. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how sometimes the things that we think will make things safer actually make things more dangerous.
Yeah, in nursing, we call that alarm fatigue, where people start ignoring alarms. So I think Carrie and or Emmett, Alex, you asked my next question, which was like, how will this collaboration take place, or how will the collaboration be useful? And I think it's helpful for Carrie to weigh in on that. And I think this question is for Emmett, but you may want to deflect it to Carrie. On the be it further resolved above those last two, so that the city of Sebastopol is committed to using the standardized Vision Zero tracking tool to monitor progress towards the key actions outlined in the Sonoma County Action Plan. Like when we say city of Sebastopol, like who do we actually mean? And has that department been consulted about using that tracking tool?
I should probably pass that to Carrie. Carrie has been consulted about this general resolution, but we haven't talked specifically
Yeah, I
about
haven't
that
looked
item.
at the specifics on it. So like some of the things like the racial profiling, I agree with Chair Lee about that. But yeah, I'm happy to work with just sort of go through and red line. Like for the consulting, we definitely want to make sure that the transportation group, but also the planning commission is included, since they're by law, one of our, if there's something going on with the general plan, they need to make a recommendation to council. So yeah, I can work directly with Emmett on that.
Great, thank you.
Or have John, since he's actually our more transportation lead, or growing into that with his role on the ACT.
So last question, and then I'll shut up. Which I should have made my first question, which is really like, this is within our, like doing the Vision Zero work is within our climate action framework. But just for you, Emmett, like, what do you see? Like, what do you see this helping? Like, what's your personal vision for bringing this forward and how it helps the city?
I guess I was starting to think about my response before you said my personal vision. So that's my caveat. So, I mean, I was thinking as everyone was talking, I did kind of forget to say, like, what's the point of the resolution when I was introducing that part. But there's a couple reasons that we thought of for doing a resolution, which one of which is just to sort of institutionalize like this idea of prioritizing safety for pedestrians and bicyclists on the roads that is already happening within our city staff, and it's a high priority for our city council and our city staff personally, but it's maybe not like written into anything official, or it is in some senses, but this would help to sort of cement that into the future going forward as there's turnover of council and staff. And the second is that it may provide some tiny bit of higher likelihood that the city could get grants that would be like a regional grant that would go through SCTA and sort of just boost that a little bit to be able to say that all of the cities had passed resolutions in favor of Vision Zero. My personal vision, I'd love to like get as much teeth in this as possible so that we can make it useful. I don't want to just have the council saying we approve of Vision Zero for the sake of that. So that's where I think continuing to think about these questions and how to make that done in a way that is feasible and not going to be costly for the city, but also can be meaningful is important. And I wanted to just add real quick too, like I had a few questions that I should have mentioned at the beginning, but one is that I'll just mention one, which is we were interested to know if everyone had suggestions on the committee for like how to engage community groups that may represent people for whom safe streets are really important, and get their input on this as we go through this process, so that we're not just sort of unveiling it without talking to people in the community. So we're talking with Bike Sebastopol and getting their ideas before we move it forward too. But if anyone has any other ideas, would love to hear that too.
Go ahead, Zaina.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is about connecting with other people in the county who work on these issues. So Sebastopol was actually part of the committee that put the document together. It was adopted by the County of Sonoma and by a handful of cities already. And this committee meets regularly and discusses the state of safety of transportation in Sonoma County. It has a dashboard where it collects information. So by passing this resolution, we're tying ourselves in more closely with that community. And I think that's important. I mean, you might talk about a general plan, but the general plan stops at the city border, right? So we had a traffic death, a bicycle death on High Street Road. Happily, it was not in town. It was like a bit out of town. But that's silly, right? To think about safety, traffic safety, in that boxed up fashion. So this allows us also to become part of that movement, to create not just safety within city limits, but also in the wider service area of Sebastopol. You're going to Andes, you go out of town. But that's where a lot of people shop, right? So I feel that this is bringing us out in connection with other people, staff people, community people. The leader of this group is working for the County of Sonoma Health Department, right? So it has all these aspects and brings all these people together.
Great, thank you. Carrie?
So yeah, just a couple of things on the resolution itself and thoughts. And I do agree with Emmett. Like in terms of what the council and the city has done in the past few years, I think it actually, in some ways, it acknowledges the priorities that the city has already placed on pedestrian safety and improvements through directing staff to get grants and commissioning the safety plans and having staff work on the local road safety plan and that type of thing. I do also agree that competitiveness for grants, if you can add in that we've passed this resolution and we are interested in that, that certainly is. As someone who's had to compile everything that you might have to back up a grant, that this is just one more arrow in your quiver for that kind of stuff. I will say one of the things that would actually, I think, in terms of what the question of what you're trying to do is to really show that the transportation working group is committed to being involved in helping review as community members staff work, or as Sino said, the county of Sonoma is about to be embarking on their general plan, as you probably know, but having folks who have sort of have taken the time to read through the local safety plan and the general plan and know where the city is wanting to go with these, to be engaged with the county when they do the transportation component of their general plan, because we do know that that's a big piece of it. SCTA has done traffic modeling, and we know that there's a higher number of pass-through trips for people who aren't stopping in Sebastopol than any other city in the county. And it makes sense. We're basically the gateway to West County, the coast, as well as a lot of the residential areas, right? So, but to make sure that is coordinated with the county, because a lot of the development that's happening out west, or the kind of the commute patterns that are happening, are not necessarily originating on Sebastopol roads. And so like, I actually remember former Mayor Slater was at the Woodmark, the very first community meeting, and there's concern about traffic, and traffic on Bodega is getting worse and worse and worse. And it's like, well, the city hasn't actually done any significant development on Bodega Avenue, but there is a lot that's happened, outside of our borders. And so having folks, so to me, having this resolution show that the Climate Action Committee has representatives that are committed to helping both city staff, being involved in reviewing our work when we're putting together like the study from the grants, as well as being involved with the county, so that, when we come, that section about consulting with you're actually being involved with those types of things and showing that commitment, I think would be really helpful when it goes to council, so they understand why you're proposing it.
Yeah, Sunali?
As far as allies go, I'm thinking of the Chamber of Commerce and the downtown businesses, because if you can share with them these ideas that will more foot traffic, I think would increase business, whereas normally it's thought of to bring in more parking to increase business. But right, if somebody's strolling down the street, then they're engaging with more of those places. So connecting with them as well.
All right. Go ahead, Sandy.
I'd like to see the original resolution that Sonoma County passed. It says it's in Appendix D, but I didn't see it in what we were sent. So I'd like to see that at some point. I agree about the racial profiling. That kind of jumped out at me as sort of like odd, or not. It just seems like, anyway, I agree with Kenna on that. And there's a SCTA, it's a quote, but it's not spelled out. So technically that should be spelled out. That's whereas in June of 2022, the Sebastopol, it's all yellowed out. It says SCTA. I think that should be spelled out what that is. That's it. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I just wonder too if with Vision Zero, I mean, from my perspective, it seems like the biggest thing we could do for safety would be a bypass for the traffic going through town. But anyway, I don't know if that's being looked at with the grant or anything else, but just to shoot that out there.
So I can provide a little information on that. So the city's general plan does talk about collaborating with the county for looking at Yana Road as a bypass. But I think, and other potential alternatives to going right through downtown when you're doing the pass-through trips, like Pleasant Hill as a kind of a secondary. Again, though, that would require the county to, I mean, obviously Yana Road's in the county, District 5, I hear, but it is in the county. So it is in our district. And, so our representative is part of that. And then the other thing, I mean, the engineering manager, Tony, and I have talked about this a little bit, just in terms of what potential could do. You're not necessarily going to get a bypass, but enhancing other road corridors like Guerneville Road and Occidental, so that if people are headed, not passing through the city. So I think you want to be really careful that you're not doing a bypass and then people aren't stopping in our grocery stores and all those other shops here, right? So we still want people who are shopping in town to stop in town. But if you're simply doing a commute route, are there other better, more efficient ways that you can do that to get from where you live to Santa Rosa? I think the reality is that there's never going to be mass transit going from a very rural area, until you get to a node. So,
All right, thank you all. Zaino?
Yeah, I encountered an organization called Sebastopol Walks, and that's, I think, mentioned in the newsletter. But it's hard to find who is in charge there. So that could be a group we're approaching, but I'd like to know who we could approach.
and that's actually sponsored by council. So, Councilmember Maurer, do you have?
I can't remember his name. I'm sorry. Yes, that's it. Yeah. Thank you.
Or Sarah Gurney should know who to direct you to. All right.
Yeah, Sarah would
There-
definitely be
there's-
able to help.
Just on that topic, I know Tor Allen is going to do a solar Sebastopol tour in August, is it? On the Sebastopol walks. Saturday morning. I don't have the date, but
All right. Any members of the public have anything else to say before we close out this? And just so you know, as you can see, we don't really wait for public comment. So if you want to say anything, just let me know.
I will just ask if you could come up to the microphone, just because this is being recorded for the website for our archive. So
And the microphone is over there. All right. So moving on. Alex, you ready for EV charging?
Born ready.
Awesome.
Well, first of all, I just want to say it's nice to see you all because I wasn't here last meeting, and I've had a few weeks of feeling sick and not at my best. So I wanted to bring a little inspiration today. Just be grateful for, being able to be here today and feeling good, if we're all feeling good, or just feeling, able and well enough to show up, and also just, happy and healthy and excited for the sunny weather outside. So let's get this thing going. Okay, so EV charging. So this is an ongoing project. We have a working group agenda item officially that's submitted as a draft. Essentially, we're proposing on-street EV charging. What I believe we've talked about this in the past. Essentially, we're looking at putting in more EV charging, specifically targeted at what we're calling on-street or utility pole charging, where it gives access to people that may not be able to have a charger at home, or they're renting and they can't put one in, or they live in an ADU, or they live in an apartment. So that's the general idea and goal for this project. Let's give a little more background here. It's obviously gonna take some, a good amount of work from city staff, and I have some questions for you guys on that. This is obviously a proposal, so, but we've definitely done some work. I mean, as far as I understand it, I mean, PG&E's, has a lot of, through something called Title 20, they're basically funding a lot of the infrastructure, basically going up to our panel. So that's the good news. But it's still going to cost money to get engineering costs and get an electrician to get a panel installed, and then also working out the deal with based on how we structure a deal with the charging platform provider. I've specifically done research with a company called Blink, and they have different revenue models where essentially it's no cost to us, but they own the unit, and they do a revenue share with us. So there's some return, but obviously the return coming back is like, maybe like a 5-year plus payout. And so that's just based on the basically what I've submitted so far. The last piece I'll say about this is that we're also looking at other potential options to partner with other organizations, potentially, like Sonoma Clean Power, some other person that may be able to, it may be a slightly different structure, or maybe, and there may be be able to cover those expenses or whatever. Because I know, obviously, my next question is, I know I missed the last meeting, but it sounds like budget is a real constraint. So what? And I also did submit this as a budget item, and I don't know if it was approved or not.
it was removed by the budget subcommittee.
Okay, great. So not approved. That's great. What is the likelihood of getting something that's removed from the budget approved from the city council?
I would say not likely this year at all.
Okay, that's great.
So I think, actually, may I step in
Sure.
just for a second? Because I think this is, so all of the light poles in the city are actually owned by PG&E, not by the city.
Mhm.
So, but one of the things that city staff has done is, and this was actually the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, which we have a representative to. All right. But you can, I think they have an interest in this. They put out a query for people who might be interested in electrification projects.
Mhm.
So we actually submitted a letter of interest for on-street charging. This exact kind of nut of like, how do you deal with that?
Right.
Our CPA, Tanya Naros, who's been to this group a few times, also submitted the same
I
thing.
remember this.
Yeah,
Yes, I
yeah.
remember this.
And so MTC is really slow on that. It sounds like it's maybe like a year out or so. And so that's kind of the avenue that we as city staff have been able to do. And Tanya, our CPA, submitted us as a potential pilot community. So that kind of makes it, there's two interests. One is, and then, sort of a way of working it out. But that would allow, our CPA to the city staff here, which we don't have city staff to commit to this kind of a project at this time. It would allow, if we were to get that and be, through their letter of interest, it's a way where MTC would be paying and doing a lot of the background work potentially. There's a lot bigger people in the room when you're talking with PG&E than the city of Sebastopol.
Of course. So I just want to clarify what you're saying. So you're saying that obviously there's budget where obviously it's going to cost us out of pocket. Like we're going to actually pay a contract. We're going to pay an engineer to do something. There's also the cost inherently of like, hey, it's city staff time. What you're saying is we don't have resources for either one.
Correct.
So great. That's just good clarification. So even if we were able to get a grant to cover the actual cost of installation and all the actual hard costs of it, we still don't have city staff time to be able to support the project.
Well, I think it depends upon, like all of this stuff that you're saying are I don't see anywhere in here where the agreement with PG&E is included. And that's the beast that we don't have an answer to right now. And that's why we went through the MTC. We don't own it. We don't have any say over it. It's the PG&E owns it.
Oh, I think.
So and it's part of their.
Let me clarify that. So, and are you talking about a light pole or are you talking about a utility pole?
They're the same thing. Oh,
so,
sorry. I mean, they're not the same thing, but they're
so they're
still
owned,
not the city.
They're owned by the. So just to clarify, so this model, and I could share some pictures if I could share my screen, but this is gonna be complicated. But I could send some pictures out via email, or it's just gonna be hard to share. But essentially, this model, because it became too complicated with the infrastructure of a light pole based on there's just not enough power infrastructure there, and then. We essentially what our idea is utilize basically next to a utility pole, so it's as minimal amount of electrical infrastructure, and whether we use the pole itself or we essentially just create the panel or utility structure right next to the pole, it's not actually connected to PG&E's equipment. Okay. We're pulling it right off of. The biggest issue is making it look good and making sure that you guys are okay with the design, the plan, right? And making sure that it follows our whatever our aesthetics in the city, whatever you want to call that, our zoning,
the standards, and making sure it's not blocking sidewalks and all that kind of stuff. So, Jerry, do you want to help interpret? Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is on. A part of the discussion occurred because of articles I read and things that I looked at. It's not on. Well, the light is on. You want to try it again? Okay. In Brooklyn, along with City of New York, one of the charging companies, the utility, I forgot who the other partner was, they're working on doing street side charging. We saw it in Europe, just about every place as well. I was surprised to find out that PG&E owns the light poles, because in the city of Sunnyvale, city of Sunnyvale owns the light poles and pays PG&E by the pole. So as we put in LEDs, we didn't get any discounts as a result of that, and PG&E got a better and better deal over time. The reason for the utility poles as opposed to a light pole, in many cases, the light poles can be, especially with LEDs, 110, not 220. They won't have the current. And so that wouldn't be the right place. And that's why I actually suggested we focus on utility poles. I have been in discussion with members of Sonoma Clean Power as well, because they're really more interested in the apartment buildings and what they can do with that. And part of this occurred from a discussion in the Electric Auto Association on why is it we have wires hanging on the public charging places. In Europe, they don't. You bring your own wire, which is one of the most vulnerable pieces of the entire puzzle. And Brent Arthur contacted me from Sonoma Clean Power and said, there's this company called Orange and they do this and blah, blah, blah. So we contacted Orange. You're right. This is the very beginning, and the discussions we've had so far had to do with this. The nut is PG&E. They want it metered. The question is whether we could convince PG&E that any of the utilities, any of the companies providing the charging stations who also meter, would accept the records from the stations and then bill back. Okay. And the reason for Sonoma Clean Power was I thought it was a business opportunity for Sonoma Clean Power. And anybody who knows Jeff recognizes any way he can get more revenue, he's going to try to do that and expand the impact of the good things that Sonoma Clean Power can do. So that's where it is. And I think it's up in the air. You're right. There is money at the MTC for this as well. And that program will be at least a year away. And MTC has just gotten the funding to keep running our transit systems and MTC for at least one more year and maybe 2 more years. And hopefully we'll get beyond that. But that's what I know about this so far. And like I said, both in the state of Washington and in Brooklyn, the role the city would play is not in putting in the stations, from my point of view. The role the city plays is to make sure that the municipal code we have allows it to occur and says what the conditions are. We do this in many, many places throughout the city. We have to allow something. In many cases, we want to promote it. And we can do that also in our code by having certain stipulations. But that's, I think, the major role for the city is looking at our code and saying, if somebody wanted to do this, if the utility wanted to do it, it could be PG&E, it could be Sonoma Clean Power, it could be somebody else. Would we allow it? And that was the same thing when we were talking about the Bird and the other companies. Does our code allow? Does our code protect people from the devices sitting around? And in most cities, we don't have this in our code because it's all new technology and new concepts, and we've never thought about it before. So it's one of the things that would need to be adjusted. Anyway, that's the position I have on it.
Thank you. That's helpful in understanding that.
I sent you a picture, Carrie, on email. So if you could share that, I just want to get a visual just so people kind of understand. I might have to zoom a little bit, but thank you, Jerry, for your higher level explanation and more concise description of what we're doing. I think that ultimately we're trying to get more EV charging. That's ultimately the goal, and we're just trying to figure out ways we can go about that.
Sunali has a question while you're waiting.
If the city installs it and manages it, there isn't a potential revenue stream?
I mean, I think that's the ultimate question of how the model is designed. I mean, I think that would be a way to make it more exciting.
Zoom in. I'm trying to zoom in.
We do that now with the charge point chargers. The city owns those, and these other models the city wouldn't own it. It'd be some either utility or other company, because installing them are pretty costly, and they get a few $1,000s in revenue.
Yeah.
It's pretty average.
Right.
It's public service.
Right.
It's not a money-making opportunity.
Yep. So here's just an example of, so this is, you can see the utility pole behind the charger, and then you can actually see the charger itself. So this is kind of a preliminary I don't know, prototype of what we would consider
So it's like freestanding,
as
but close to power.
one option.
And
Right.
very not adding a lot to the footprint.
Right.
Yeah.
The orange model is there's no cable. And you carry your cable with you. It weighs a bit too. And you're plugging it into the cars come.
Got it.
So I will say, I have not looked at our municipal code in terms of that, but whether or not we would explicitly allow that currently, but I think something like this, I don't think would be an issue for, I mean, obviously council would need to approve it if it's a change to our municipal code to allow it, but just as a policy, our climate action framework, which is adopted by council, does talk about encouraging this and trying to figure out a way to do this, because there's a lot of people who don't have garages or parking on their site, and this would expand EV and cut greenhouse gas and all those other good things. So just looking at this as a model. So thank you, Alex, for sending that. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
I don't see where this would be a huge issue.
I guess the last question, because ultimately the first proposal was having a charging company partner with the city, but it sounds like that's kind of out of the question in terms of actually getting these like on the ground. It sounds like it may be more advantageous for us to either create a recommendation to make code, or just try to get our RFPs to get actual companies that want to put chargers in our area.
So I can look at the municipal code to look at whether or not it would inherently be allowed. It may be that it's allowed through the franchise agreement, which is the agreement for PG&E to use our right of way for their poles. It's all, it's our land, it's their poles. There's agreements in place for that. How that all works, I don't know. It's not my area of specialty. That's public works, public right of way. Yeah, I do know that, Dante from Public Works has been working with PG&E to try to get EV charging at the Burnett Street parking lot. And I can tell you that took a huge number of hours. I was involved with some of those meetings, and it never ended up going anywhere because of the cost to do the really high-end chargers instead of the more basic chargers. So he is looking with the grant writer that we have. I believe there was a grant which they submitted for us to potentially fund that project. So, but yeah, I do, RFPs and vetting companies and policies do take a lot of staff time.
Carrie, is there anything, given that this says there's no budget, is there anything that the CAC, Transportation Working Group, could do to pre-position information if MTC, if grants come through, if other pathways open up, is there a level of pre-work that's going to need to be done anyway of identifying likely sites or, something that could take some work away from city staff?
Sure. So I think, something like that, there's obviously staff has less time to go research something that isn't, one of our critical paths. So like stuff like this and if there's an outline of here's what's needed, in terms of the infrastructure, and if there's information, the piece I'm not sure is how to coordinate with PG&E if it's their utility poles, if that's this group directly, or, they do have a point person that we've been working with for the EV chargers who's been really proactive and great. But that's kind of one where, I don't know if MTC has any leeway or capacity to do this kind of a thing. Because again, if it's PG&E, it's going to affect every single city in the Bay Area. Okay. Okay.
Carrie, can you clarify your question about are you saying that it just takes a lot of staff time to work with PG&E to facilitate the installation or facilitate the approval? What exactly are you?
Well, like for instance, with the so you've got a utility pole. Is there enough power? How is it going to work? Who's going to be leasing it? Who's going to be running it? Is it, I mean, if it's just, if someone, if PG&E came in and said, we want to do this, it'd be really easy from a city perspective.
So, okay, because I'd already have inquired fairly extensively with a PG&E engineer about this. So I guess I think that's part of the proposal is essentially building an engineering plan to submit to PG&E with all that information, and that's that's part of one of the line items of $2,500 to develop that to submit it. So I guess it just
Right. So
it's kind of like chicken and egg in a way, but it's like it's not that complicated. I guess it's really just do we have the funding at that point? It's not
Right. And so the city doesn't have a staff engineering department. We have a contract engineer. So we
we would
basically
just hire
be
it out. It would just be
hiring a
it would be
consultant to do it.
exactly.
So that's a budget
Yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Are there any cities in the Bay Area that we've seen anything like this? Yeah. Or even in California, or like, I guess in PG&E's service area, is anybody doing this? Yeah. Yeah.
We had there was one in Lancaster, but when Woody knew the planning director, but we could never get a hold of him to get any like comments about how they facilitated that.
Interesting. Okay. I think, Alec, go ahead, Sandy.
Would these require dedicated parking spaces?
Yes.
Okay, because I think that would be an issue for the public, because the public is already complaining about the parking issue downtown. But the other thing is there a map, or I know this is a ways down, but I think it'd be really helpful to have a map of all the current on-street charging spaces for the public, so that when you're making a decision,
there are no on-street charging. There's parking lot charging, but this is a model. Yeah, this is a model for like more like residential or like close to multifamily.
Okay, so it's not necessarily in the downtown core.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and part of that, Councilmember Maurer, is when you look at sort of the older apartment buildings, the landlord isn't necessarily going to retrofit their parking lot to install EVs. Our code requires it when you do new housing, as we talked about with the Woodmark and the City Ventures, but not to retrofit. So how can we make EVs more accessible for renters and people who are living in, there's also plenty of owners who live in an older home, Victorian, and they don't have parking on site. How can they get access to charging? So it's actually more focused on residential areas, I think, where that could be helpful to, if you don't have somewhere to charge your EV, you're not going to buy an EV, right?
All right. Thank you, Alex, and Transportation, and Carrie. Hopefully, do we have enough time for the electrification survey results? Okay. Leave me 5 minutes at the end to clean up. Perfect. Yeah.
I hope so. Okay. Okay. Oh, wait, wrong one. Thank you very much.
I was like, I didn't think we were getting this one.
No, wait. I don't know why I opened that one. Just a second.
Jerry, you might want to move that mic a little bit so that.
Yeah, I'll get it. Yeah, you might have to do your stuff. Can't find where I put it. There it goes. Okay, so with that. Oh, I have to share for a second. Just make sure. Yeah, 3 months.
While we are waiting, I'm just going to say our next agenda item, the Gravenstein Apple Fair, was going to be Ambrosia and Diana, and I'm assuming we're tabling that. But because that's our next meeting is going to be so close to the Apple Fair, if anybody wants to volunteer for that event, if we are having it, which I'm not sure we are, just let me know and I'll make sure that they get that information. The 12th and 13th, I believe, of August.
And that is not a Brown Act issue, so just feel free to, because it's already, we've already talked about.
So we can send out an email to the group saying who wants to volunteer.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
perfect.
It's not
Great.
coming before the committee. So
All
you've already
right.
decided you want to do
Hooray.
the tabling.
Okay,
Coordinating
perfect.
that is therefore not a Brown Act.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so I was trying to get rid of all of us on the right-hand side here, and I realized that's not me. So here's the electrification survey results. And it took us quite a bit of time to get through it. Oops, I'm good. So come on, there we go. Basically what we're trying to do is 2 things. And Lisa and Steve and Phoebe probably did most of the work on getting the survey itself in a framework that has all the questions that we wanted to get answered. So it had a combination of finding out who's interested in electrification, what do people know about electrification, and it's part of an advertiser as well. And you can tell by the statement and some of the statements that are here. And since I had popped up the other presentation by mistake, I've since, as a result of Zano, been studying, what does electrification do? What are the impacts to us? And if you guys want to see that presentation sometime, I was kind of amazed at the numbers I picked up. There's a very good number of people who responded. You already know it was connected and collected through the city's website. And the reason for electrification and energy in general, we're also working on the metrics group. We're looking at, are we reducing how much energy we use and what kind of energy are we using? And that's part of what we're picking up from here as well. But basically, one of the points, and maybe it's later in the slide deck, was some things that people picked up from this was we're trying to make them electrify. The point is this. The state of California already said no more gas after 2050. The utility said we don't want to supply gas after 2045 because we don't want to be in the business. So basically, electrification is going to occur. And the first studies on this actually occurred in 2010. One of the things we got was people are aware that there's new technologies and that electrification is not what you remember from the 1970s, but they didn't know the details, and they don't know the details about how they can fund it and why it's beneficial for them. Cost is the primary barrier. And we saw this over and over throughout the survey. And we're going to show you the results here as well. And because of where we are and the experience we've had in the last few years, having reliable electricity is a precondition of electrifying. One of the things that we also got was people can't find contractors. The contractors aren't trained. And if they do contact contractors and say, hey, I want to put in a heat pump, contractor says, no, you don't want to do that. And that's because very few are trained. And those who are doing it today are charging what I consider unreasonable amounts for it because the installation of mine costs about the same as a hot water heater. The financial options that are there are complicated and difficult to access. And so that needs to be addressed. And like I said, a lot of the responses suggest that the city of Sebastopol is initiating electrification as opposed to trying to prepare its citizens for what's coming so that it's not a big surprise for them and painful. Oops, no, I'm going in the wrong direction. There we go. So demographics, and start with that. I'll move this out so I can see what's in front of me. We were really surprised. The number of people that we got from Sebastopol for the number of citizens who live in Sebastopol. This is a very high percentage of the citizenry. As an example, MTC has done a number of surveys as well and looking for the reliability, and they're disappointed about the number of responses. We got enough responses to have a 5% margin of error. That's a very low error rate. And most of the people who responded were inside Sebastopol. Many were in the unincorporated areas. We don't know how close they are. They're in 95472. And then we had a few from Santa Rosa and then others who answered the survey. And there we go. And it was people with their primary residence. Okay, it wasn't renters. Now, in Sebastopol, my recollection is about 45 to 50% of the population rents. So you would expect that would be 50-50, but it's not, because the people who can actually do something are the ones who own the building. And so it's residents who live here and own their building. That comes later on when we have a recommendation of follow-on work that needs to be done. We asked about awareness on heat pumps, and people knew about heat pumps. When we get further through the survey, we'll find out that even though they know about heat pumps, they don't know the difference between a heat pump and an electric heater. And there's a very big difference between those. I gave a talk last week, and Steve corrected something on it, and I've changed my deck now, so I use 3.71 as opposed to 3.17. And it turned out that in using a heat pump to get the same amount of heat into your home or into your water costs you less in today's electricity than the gas costs you. Induction cooktops, again, we've got lots of people knew about them, but how they work, what they do, and why they might like them as opposed to be forced to use them wasn't clear. And lots of chefs are now starting to use induction cooktops because they're so adjustable compared to electric, and electric really could be pretty difficult to use. So it has the adjustability of gas without the bad health effects and environmental impact. They know there's rebates and they know there's incentives in most cases, but how you get them turned out, as we went through the survey, very difficult to figure out. And I've even tried contacting the places that were supposedly the experts, and they sent me to places that didn't exist, or for incentives that don't exist, or the wrong contact. And I found a couple that I've sent to Carrie that I thought we might leverage at the county level that are taking the time and have staff and are trying to do education. This is ongoing education, because the incentives that exist today, in about 45 days, maybe they don't exist anymore because the money ran out or something else has changed. Then we asked what kinds of changes were people considering. Hot water heaters and space heaters turned out to be the two largest that people were considering making changes of. Now, those are the ones where we can get the greatest reduction in energy. Now, the metrics group has been collecting information now as to how much energy is pumped into the city of Sebastopol. And it turns out that we have marginally reduced our energy per capita over the last 13 years. Now, that's hard to believe since we predominantly are using LEDs now. We're doing other things. So there's a lot more that we need to be working on. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can see everything. Stove and oven, those end up being electric. Battery storage, we were surprised the number of people looking at it. Now with NEM 3, probably a lot more people are looking at battery storage because of the changes in how things work. Many people are looking at rooftop solar. Are you considering electrification? This was very heartening. 45% of the people are considering electrification. And they need more information. And why aren't people considering electrification? So this is how we started putting things together. When we find out, are you considering electrification? Are you not considering electrification? Why would you not? What are the obstacles? And asking those questions. Primary problem that we run into is the grid, as far as why not considering. Now, I know Sandy asked that question one time of me at several meetings ago when I brought something up about electrification, saying, with what we have here, how can we do these things? And the answer is this, is that you can't do this by itself. There's other things that will change in our society as to how we get energy and how energy comes to our homes. That's in process already. And there's a team at PG&E working on vehicle to grid. There's a team at PG&E working on microgrids. This is happening in other places as well. So we'll hear more about that. But the problem that we've had over the past has been that legislation and regulations have been designed to protect our investor-owned utilities and making sure that they could stay solvent. Well, that's a centralized approach where we had control over the centralized energy, but we had no control over consumption. Well, today we're moving into something where we have no control over supply and we have no control over demand. So it's an entirely different infrastructure. And that's happening not in Sebastopol, it's happening throughout the country. Obstacles. Number one, so much bigger than everything else. It's too expensive. Zeno arranged for me to meet with his neighbor who works at Sonoma Clean Power and talk to her about her hot water heater, her heat pump. I think it cost her a couple of $100 because she knew where to find all the incentives. And she has a much more expensive one than I have. I applied for one and it turned out that I was 2 days too late. So I didn't get the incentive because I had installed it 90 days before and I applied on the 92nd day. Those are the kinds of things that are making the conversion to electric expensive. And recently the analysis that I did, again, is Zeno's fault, reading a book on Electrify. I went and checked all the numbers to find out that in our area, it would cost you less running electric heat pumps in your house than using gas. Assistance needed, financial. So the numbers fit and sync up all the way through. And by the way, I hope you read the longer write-up that was sent to you. We did a lot more writing up and thinking about what the responses did and correlating them. That's the reason it took a couple of months to do this. Rather than just take the answers and plump them down and give you the answers, we wanted to analyze them and then look up and find out what some of the details were that were behind these things as well. Technical. Well, who do you go to for the technical help? My installer, I had to read the manual and tell him how to install it. I was lucky enough when I got my gas furnace replaced that those guys actually knew how to do it. And they were actually pretty good. Installer referral. So you see all of this fitting together. And then there were generalized comments, which Steve went through and started gathering what we just said, what do you want to say? And most of them talked about the grid. Most of them said, we need more information because it's not in a place where we can get it. And they thanked us for the survey because they wanted to get more information. So those general comments led us to understand that most people believe that Sebastopol was leading the charge on electrification as opposed to trying to protect its citizens by making sure that they were all prepared for the changes that are occurring. One of the points that was brought up, this whole thing about charging cars. 50% of the cars, new cars bought in the Bay Area last year were plug-ins. Now, they weren't all full electric, some were hybrid plug-ins. And those numbers are growing.
Was that 50 or 15?
50.
Wow.
Okay, the year before, 27% of of new car sales were electric. So the numbers are growing very fast. There's a forecast by one of the Sandy Monroe that by 2027, that 50% of all new car sales throughout the United States will be electric. Having driven an electric car since 1998, I got to tell you, it's a lot easier to drive them and they're a lot safer. So I like them. Anyway, people weren't aware of the requirements, and there's a lot of information that's missing. So that takes us then to, Steve, I skipped through a lot of stuff instead of reading it off the slides. I hope that's okay. Our next steps, first of all, we need to post the survey results to a publicly accessible link so people can see the results, the report primarily. There were 222 of those 500 respondents who said, would you please send the survey results to me? I'd like to know about this stuff. We think, and this would come from you, that the results should be presented to council, and that would be an action item by you. And that we believe that the results should be shared with other agencies. A number of other agencies have actually reached out to us. Sonoma Clean Power is one, said, we're interested in finding out what your results are. These are all the different agencies working on this, and I think we should hook up with them and say, here's what we did with our survey, here's the information we got so far from citizens and what they're looking for. And then we need to work with the committee itself and figure out what some of the other next steps would be and identify the first efforts for electrification. So now we've surveyed and we understand some of the barriers as well, and some of the things that we might need to do. Whoops, and that was the last slide, huh? Yeah. Yeah. You know, I'm prepared to answer them.
Thank you for your report. So I recently found out that Sebastopol has 48% homeowners and 52% renters.
Yeah.
So when you look at the slide where it's do you rent or own your home, you've got 12% renters and you've got 88% homeowners,
Yeah.
which doesn't really reflect the demographic for Sebastopol.
Yeah.
So I think part of the problem is that, for example, at Burbank Heights and Orchards and other apartment buildings, they don't get a water bill. So
Sandy,
they don't have access
no, I
to the
understand.
survey.
No, I understand that. Did you read the report?
I read a lot of
Okay, well, in the report, one of the things that we pointed out was the miss on renters.
Okay.
And that we believe that either another survey or another effort was required for renters, because there's two things that are occurring here. And this
Excuse
is,
me,
well,
where is that written? Is this in the survey results?
I don't know if it's in the we didn't put it in the slide deck, but it's in the report that we wrote out. It's probably down towards the tail end. Is that right, Steve? Yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay.
Before the comments.
Yeah. Because the reason that we look at this is that if you look at it from the point of view of who has the cost, in most cases, the landlord has the cost.
Yeah.
And who has the value? The renter has the value. So we have an economic disjoint. And one of the questions that we need to do is, or create, is a survey and find out how can we close that gap? By the way, we're not the only ones to notice that. Oakland's noticed this. Everybody else who's been working on this, it's one of the nuts to crack, is to figure out how we can make it that landlords can benefit by electrifying the buildings so that their tenants can get the benefit. And we haven't figured out how to do that yet, but part of the way to do that is to find out from landlords, what is it that you think is most important, and can we address those things? Sandy had another question though, I think.
That was it.
Okay.
Yeah, and
I told
Sandy,
you I had an answer.
page 4 talks about of the full report, which is on the meeting page for this meeting. Page 4 of that report talks about the renter versus
Yeah,
owner.
and it's probably in the deck, and I went through it too fast in order to read what I put in front of me.
I'm just going to let everyone know we're very short on time. So
Not my fault.
We consistently found when we were talking to people at events and farmers market and stuff like that, oh, I'm a renter. You know, they wanted to walk away, and it was, no, we want you to participate. But fortunately, a lot of the funding that's coming up for incentives and rebates is geared towards rental property. Finally, it's coming, but it's been very slow.
Yeah,
And there is that disconnect. We have to figure out some way to help landlords want to do this.
Yeah. And I do suggest looking at the report, because in the report, we have a number of things that we thought were important to go forward with. And I kind of did them on the side here. Number one is we need better information. We need to get the information out to people. We need people to understand that electrification is coming. This is not Sebastopol doing this, but electrification is coming, and we want to prepare, and we want everybody to benefit from it. That's the part that's most important for people to recognize that they can benefit from this. Some of our financial institutions don't have this yet. I mean, if you bought a house, would you pay for the house up front and then live in it and have the benefit of the house all that time? Well, we have a lot of these things that are occurring. There's financial structures that do exist, but they're difficult to get to. PACE is a really good one. But does anybody know how to apply for PACE and where it would, where you can get that? So,
I think this is so great, and I am so like this. The report, the longer report, is so worth reading if anybody did not read it, and it's really well done. I have a couple of suggestions before we post the survey results. The pie chart about the percentage, 45% want to electrify and 55% don't, I think is misleading, because you're missing the slice of the people who've already electrified, which you capture in the following data. But I think the pie chart, like, people really like pie charts. And what we really want to do is, social marketing wise, show people that the electrifiers are in the majority or as close to the majority as possible.
Yeah.
So I think adding that already electrified slice into that initial pie chart would be more informational and also more tipping people the direction we want them
and
to go.
if we had thought about that when we did the survey, then we would have the data so we could put it on the pie chart.
Yeah.
But we didn't ask that question. In fact, a number of things that we learned from going through the survey, and I think we have it in the report.
You have it in the report, but I think
No.
I think you can make a new pie chart. Go ahead.
What we have in the report is the gaps that we had as a result of how we asked the questions.
Of course.
And that's one of the gaps. We did have a number of people said, I have already electrified. And they were excited to tell us that.
Yeah. So I do think it's worth redoing that pie chart. I mean, you can.
But I can't redo the pie chart because I don't have the data.
But you do have the data. You have the N. You have 39 people already electrified. So you can take those out of the. Yeah. You do, though. You have that information in your Survey Monkey. Which of those? I mean, it's just like it's a data. It takes more data analysis.
I understand, Jerry, and the desire to keep the honesty of the statistics. Lies, and damn statistics, right? That's, you can interpret it any way you want. But so I think perhaps the way forward is to note on that particular pie chart slide page. Don't change the pie chart, but note that the survey didn't ask about existing electrification. We do know that a number of people already, have. So just explain it on that page.
That's fine. We can do that. One of the things I forgot to also mention was this, and it's in the write-up, and it probably was here, and I went right past it. One of the largest gaps is this: when you go to get a furnace or a stove or a range or a hot water heater, do you call the city? Or do you talk to your neighbor, or do you call a contractor? And the contractor is the one who gives you advice. One of the things that we wrote down was the key to selling the concept of electrification is to get every contractor that we have trained and comfortable and recognizing the value. The ones that I've worked with who are now in this business are very much promoters, but most of them are not.
So this is such an important topic that I would like to continue it at the next meeting.
Oh, okay.
And just continue the discussion at the next meeting. And hopefully committee members who were not present or who are present and did not have the time to read the full 23 pages, which maybe skip the last part about every public comment, which is informative, but like you can, it takes a lot more time to read all those public comments than to read the rest of the report. And the report's really well done.
It took us 2 months to write the report. So
yeah, I think it would be worthwhile for us to continue the conversation at the next meeting and have more time for that discussion.
Ken, one of the things I'd ask the committee to do is to think about what are the actions that the committee wants to propose as a result of reading the report. I don't want to put the words in your mouth. We gave you some hints as to what those things might be.
Yeah.
Because some of them will cost money. Some of them are just how we think about things. Some of them is go look for somebody else who's going to help us do this.
So Sandy, did you have something that needs
Yeah,
to be
I
expressed
have
today?
a question. So what I have that was sent to me is the draft Sebastopol electrification survey results. It's about 23 pages.
Yeah,
Is
that's
this
the
the
one.
report that?
That's the
Yeah,
report.
That's the,
okay.
and I just
And it
changed
has all the
I changed the
comments.
name on the version I put up on the website that we're using because I realized that was, Steve started with a draft and we kept editing to the draft and we never changed the title.
Well, I think it's great. And I think it's really, I'm really glad to see all the comments included. Yeah. Thank
All
you.
right. So we will continue this discussion at next meeting. And thank you guys for this work. It's really so valuable.
One note on this, I think, and I don't know if it needs an action from the committee, but I would like to look at when we could schedule this as a presentation to council. It's because, and Jerry, I'd like to work with you because your presentation was like great in terms of the time that council would, and just the knowledge. So, yeah, I want to work with you to get that scheduled. I know they have I mean, it won't be August, it'll be September or sometime this fall. So just given their calendar. Cool.
So I do have one question though too. You mentioned before that people are asking, when can we see the survey results, right? So is that something that we could, that we need to actually vote on? That now we can make the survey results accessible to those people who requested them, or put them?
I think this recording will be posted online and we can refer people to that and say the approved survey results would be available after the next meeting.
So this draft survey is already on the website.
Yeah.
So it's already public, right? In its draft form, and I can send that out to folks. But if you, I mean, it sounds like we had, if you want to, I heard a couple of inputs, like the note about the I've already electrified. I don't know if there are other comments or sort of edits that you all want to suggest to Jerry and Steve, or
Yeah, I think it would be good to have a full discussion
And-
before we move it from like draft status to
Okay, then I
fully approved
wouldn't-
status. And so,
Steve has 222 emails that ask for the survey. And if you would empower us to send with the change that you asked for, survey out to 222 people, that would be nice.
oh, what I'm saying is that we would say it's a draft at this point until it's a finished
Yeah.
discussion by
yeah,
the
and then we
committee.
can put when we get the final, we can put that on the Climate Action
Yeah.
Committee page, not just the meeting date.
Yeah.
So, okay. And I can probably get you like the link to where that will be on the website. So you can also include that when you send your email out saying, it looks like we'll probably be finalizing, the draft at our next meeting date, whatever that is, check back for any final results.
Yeah, and I just think we want to, like, for press purposes, because I think it's worth letting the press know, we want to have a final product that is what we want to put in front of the press. That's not labeled draft.
Yeah, we won't put it in the newsletter. It won't be going to council until after this group has had the next meeting and to finalize the review.
Perfect. So thank you guys. We're going to table items E and F. Most of the chair report items, unless you haven't done your ethics training, please do it. Just for everyone to know, the new city website, as Carrie said, is still in process. Things are still getting fixed. So be patient because it's been a lot of work for them. And if you have input for the next agenda, please see me before you leave today so I get it captured. And then the action items to review are, do we have any action items? This is why I need Joshua.
I think the action is to continue.
Continue on.
I'm sending in a couple of things. Susie helped make notes so I don't forget this time. Yay. And then the community impact report and the local road safety plan, which I just emailed the engineer for the final of that because it looks like I only have the draft. And then continuing the electrification survey at the next meeting.
Yeah. And Sonali, did you have anything about the library event that we need to cover at this meeting? No, perfect. So thank you all for coming. We're going to adjourn to the August 8th at 3 p.m. Same bat time, same bat place. and we appreciate your time.